depending. I have mentors for different things, and I actually recommend that. So I have like a mentor for like technical things, like, okay, I'm working on this problem, let's talk it through. I also have a mentor for career advice who doesn't really understand what I do day to day, but they understand, how to progress in your career. Then I have female mentors who kind of understand what it's like to be a female engineer. Then I have a mentor who's like Black, and he understands what that's like and the challenges that come with that. So I definitely approached it that way, because when you're a person like me, where you have such an intersectionality of underrepresented minority features, you kind of need to diversify your mentorship, because no one person can really support every part of who you are.
Hey, and welcome back to Pathways, the podcast where we talk with West Indians who are out here at home or in the diaspora, making work for them. These are the folks who are out there charting their own paths, figuring things out in a non-traditional field, or just in an uncommon way. If you're looking for some inspiration on where to take things in your own career, or you just like hearing about what others are doing and how they've gotten to where they are, then stick around. You can be a fly on the wall of my conversation with them. And maybe you'll take something away to use in your own life. When you're done, leave a comment and let us know what you liked or what you want to hear more of. And now, let's get into the episode. Professor Liselle Joseph is currently an assistant professor with dual appointments with Virginia Tech's Aerospace and Ocean Engineering Department and National Security Institute. Her research focuses on hypersonic phenomenology, using both experimental techniques and high-fidelity CFD. Before joining Virginia Tech's faculty, Dr. Joseph worked in industry, gaining invaluable research into current real-world engineering standards and methodologies, current needs and landscape of the community, as well as industry expectations for new graduates. Her most recent industry work involved a range of developments and research within the hypersonic flow field. Prior to 2020, Dr. Joseph developed new compression system technologies for both commercial and military applications at Pratt and Whitney. This was a super interesting discussion, especially if you're interested in things like space, airplanes, mechanics, flow. If you're into physics or you're thinking of getting into engineering, you definitely want to hear what Liselle has to say. So don't wait, let's hop in. Hi, Liselle, and welcome to Pathways.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'll start by saying that you've been pretty widely interviewed and quoted already. I think a couple of years ago, I started seeing your face around a lot of local media, I guess.
Yeah, I've had a few interviews. I wouldn't say widely, but yeah, I've talked to people. I feel like that's important when you get to a certain point to turn back and make sure you mentor and reach back and give back.
Appreciate that. So, not to make you a broken record, but I'm hoping that we can get into a few other things here and to understand your process of getting into the field that you're in and how you've gotten to where you are today. So to get started, we'll give a very quick background of, who Liselle is. Where did you grow up and kind of what was your childhood like?
Sure. So I was born in Grenada in the parish of St. Andrews. I was actually born in Montcamel, and then we moved to Marquis. And that's where I spent my entire childhood until I moved to the US at 19. So always the country girl. Always did that. I went to all the country schools. The only non-country school I went to was CC. So that's kind of been my entire childhood. I had all the quintessential Grenadian experiences as a child growing up. And it was wonderful, and it's made me who I am.
Nice. And back then, do you remember, or was there anything in particular that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Actually, not particularly. I mean, before the age of like, I want to say 14, 15, I didn't really know. I knew that it would probably be science, but the truth is, when I was really young, I was just looking around for, I don't know, to see careers and what other people were doing. And unfortunately, that was pretty limited in Grenada. You saw teachers, a doctor or two, and that was basically it. So I remember when I was about 6, I traveled for the first time. I went to Trinidad, and I came back thinking I want to be an air hostess, like a stewardess. I thought that was so cool and so different. But as time went on, I realized what I really enjoyed doing was not the English, not the reading, not all that stuff. I was good at it, but I definitely liked math and physics once I got into that. And so I knew it had to be science. Where exactly, I wasn't sure.
Okay. And so you said you left Grenada at the age of 19. I guess a few steps before we get there. So you would have decided around the choosing, the subject choosing era, I guess, that you want to do sciences. So I'm guessing that's what you went with for like CXC. And then what did you choose going into college, and like what was your thought process on selecting?
So interestingly, for CXC, I still wasn't sure. I knew what I liked, but I was also very aware that you don't always get to do what you like. So I wanted to diversify a little bit. So I made sure I had a business class in there. I had languages in there, in addition to the sciences, just in case, I didn't find a scholarship and I didn't find a way to do what I wanted to do. Then I at least had those. I could go into something else, or maybe start my own business or something in Grenada. So even when I was choosing, I chose what I wanted to do, but I also chose things that were practical. And I don't want to necessarily criticize other people, but I do see students nowadays just kind of doing subjects almost for the volume of it, just picking a large number of them and just trying to get the numbers up. And I understand why. I mean, there's scholarships at play, there's prestige at play, there's awards and so on. So you want to be competitive. But I just want to urge people to also think about practically. Grenada is small, resources are limited. Choose wisely. If you're good at physical education, great, do that. But if that's not something you think can get you into any type of career, then maybe choose something that's a little bit more in line with something practical for you. So I just wanted to make sure and say that, because I've seen that happening in the last 5 to 10 years, and it's surprising to me.
Yeah,
because I took so much time in choosing, and our teachers helped us choose. So now I'm a little confused as to the thought process sometimes.
Yeah, you hear 22 subjects being done at CXC level. It's like I can barely manage with my 11 or whatever I had.
Yeah, and that's definitely a concern, because I when I did 11, that was a lot.
Right. So
I don't know how you 2x that and have any type of balance and any type of life and self-care and actually take care of yourself, and actually develop any type of passion for any one of those, because you spread so thin. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, we don't know. I'll have to talk with some of those students and see what it's actually like.
Absolutely.
So again, you mentioned kind of like, it sounds like at this point you're still thinking Grenada, like what can you do at home? And then 2-3 years later, after you graduate TAMCC, you're on a plane. So what at what point did the chance or the opportunity or the decision to move abroad come in?
So going into TAMCC, I continued with the sciences. I did communications as well, but it was mostly science just because I wanted to be competitive for a possible scholarship. I never really thought I'd be in the running for the island scholarship, because that's just not something that I've seen come to the country schools, quote unquote. So that didn't seem possible for me, but I wanted to at least be competitive for maybe other ones through universities or some type of other grad. I was very blessed that I worked hard, and I'm not going to, pretend I'm some magical genius. I worked really hard, and I was lucky in that there was a group of students at TAMCC. We were all pretty diligent, and we worked together, and it was almost constructive competition. I remember there was a few of us in the sciences. Like I was in the same class as Roland Antoine, Mikhail Burke. I mean, these are brilliant people, and we just kind of helped each other become better, I think. So I definitely didn't do this by myself, and we had little study groups and did homeworks and those sort of things, and it just came out that I was one of the top, and I was able to get a scholarship. So that really opened up, the Island Scholarship really opened up a lot of doors for me. I'm not exactly sure what the plan would have been without it.
Yeah. Okay. So, hard work, like you said.
Absolutely.
Getting the Island Scholarship. Well, at that point, was it fully open for you to go anywhere? Was there a limit? Were you supposed to, go somewhere in the Caribbean, or what did that look like?
You absolutely were supposed to go somewhere in the Caribbean, which I was open to, but the more I looked into what I wanted to do, it had to be aerospace. If I could do aerospace, I wanted to do it. Now, if the government had said, no, you can't, you have to, then I would have taken that. Obviously, it's still an opportunity. I'm still grateful and blessed to get it. But they were not that stringent, and they saw my potential, and I talked to them and I told them what I wanted to do, and I justified it that it wasn't in the Caribbean. And they were on board and they were supportive, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. So the only reason they opened it up was because there is no aerospace in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what was that process for you like, deciding on aerospace and then finding the right school for you?
Yeah. So I chalk this up to just fate almost, just being really blessed and directed by God almost, because the cycle for applying for schools in the US is very strict. And I learned I had gotten the Island Scholarship in like early January, and the applications were already closed. So I was looking around at the top schools, and Virginia Tech was still open. So I applied only to that one because it was a top school. I didn't want to waste time with any ones that weren't. And it turns out I got in the same time. And then the government really worked with me to switch the timelines to make sure that I could use the scholarship for it. And so within like 3 months, I had gone from not knowing I was the Island Scholar to getting ready to come to the US. So that process happened really quickly. And like I said, I'm very grateful to the government. And at the time, or at least after I moved here, it was NDC government. But before that, it was NNP. And I'm always like blown away by how supportive both of them were to get me here. But then also when I was here, I even got supplemental funding from NDC to support that. People like Emmeline Play helped me on the NNP side, and then I had Mr. Blash on the NDC side. It was really like an entire country government push to make sure I had what I needed here, and I was successful. And the whole process was not in line with the university cycle, but they really worked with me to help that. So that's how that process was. It wasn't, it wasn't laid out and codified per se. Mm-hmm. As far as like deciding, like I said, I described how I decided Virginia Tech, just looking for top schools, but how I decided aerospace was a little unique. I knew I wanted to be more on the mechanical side of things. So when I think about engineering, I think about engineering is abroad. subject.
Mm.
You could be more on the quote unquote mechanical side, which is more physics and building things and statics and dynamics and how things work and move together. You could also be more on the biology side, which is like biomedical engineering, or there's like robotics and fluid flows and all that for internal to the body, things like making prosthetics and all those things. All that's engineering. And then there's like the chemistry side as well. So I looked at all of those, and I was definitely more to the math and physics, which was the mechanical side. So I started looking at like majors in that area, and I learned so many majors. I did not know there were so many variations of engineering.
Yeah. And was this just like Google search?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And at the time I had that, thankfully. And there was no one to really talk to. I remember talking to my physics professor at TAMCC and my chemistry as well. And they knew the basic engineering, but like things like biomedical or like engineering science and mechanics, these are like majors I had never heard about. Industrial engineering. And civil was another one that was well known. So I just did some reading, and aerospace just really looked really attractive, and it looked really fun, and it looked like something that when it got really hard, I'd be able to push through it because it was fun, because it was challenging to me. And that was something I was looking for, because what I found before is when chemistry got hard or biology got hard, I'd get bored. But when physics got hard, I don't know, it just, you think about what exactly you're doing, how it applies to the world, and all of a sudden you get some energy and some focus back. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. So with that, thought in mind, you did your research. When you actually got into the program, did it kind of live up to those expectations? Or was there any point where you're like, I wasn't expecting this?
I think the biggest challenge for me was not really the content, surprisingly.
Okay.
I was worried just because I was just worried that I wouldn't succeed, like any human. But the content, the actual technical work, I was always able to figure that out. The real challenges came with the culture shock and with, we grew up in a very British system, and this is an American system. Engineering's a little different in terms of the units, the words they use, the equations are the same, but like logarithmic is a little different. Like it just, math is math, but it presents a little bit different in the US than what we grew up with. So kind of doing that conversion was interesting. And then also just the general culture shock, just missing home and missing seeing my people and talking to my people. That was difficult.
Yeah.
But I never, from the standpoint of whether I could do it technically, I never really had those thoughts or those doubts. It was more like, do I really want to stick this out? Because would I rather be at home? Would I rather be doing something else that might make me happier?
Oh, interesting. So how long was this program?
So it's a 4-year program. Most people do it in 5 just because it's a difficult program, the aerospace program. But I finished in 3 because I had TAMCC credit. So I always tell students, don't underestimate your TAMCC stuff.
Yeah.
They probably won't accept it if you get like C's or something, but I had really all A's. So I got like a year off because of that. They all transferred over.
Math and physics, I'm guessing, or was the chemistry?
So the chemistry transferred as well. Wow. So I got out of those like first year freshmen. I got out of all of it.
Yeah, like the intro level stuff. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So given that, 3 years in, you're missing home, I'm guessing by then you kind of got used to things a bit. But what was your next step? So you're now open to, like this world. I also know, or I've heard that it can be a little bit difficult as an international student to get jobs in the aerospace industry in the US. So what was that like for you, like job searching and then getting your first job after college?
Yeah, so that was an entire process unto itself, and part of the culture shock, because in Grenada, you have your CV and you know things and you hear things and here everything's online. You don't know people, you don't even know who you're submitting things to. You see job postings, you don't know what it means. So I relied a lot on the university because they have most universities have excellent career services, and they have career fairs where companies come and you go see them and give them the resume. But you are completely right. It was very difficult as an international student in the aerospace industry, but in general, just getting a job as an international student in the US is difficult because you have to be sponsors for a visa and eventually a green card. And you really have to prove that you're quote unquote worth that because it's an investment of time and money.
Yeah.
So you have to prove that to the employer. So for me, I was just open to general engineering, not necessarily aerospace, but I thought if I get my toe in somewhere. So I was applying submitting my resume, to all the databases and so on. But I got an internship it was my last year, so that third year of undergrad, I actually got an internship in a company that did big gas engines. So it wasn't really aerospace, but it was engines and propulsion systems and the stuff that I do. And that company was called Cummins, and they didn't care whether I was international or not. And so they gave me an internship. And so that kind of started the ball. Once you get your toe in somewhere and you can put on your resume that you have some work experience, that really helps. But then at the end of it, looking for a full-time job, that's difficult. Internships are one thing. Getting a full-time job is difficult. And so I wanted to go to grad school anyway, but that was definitely the final nudge. Like, it's a lot easier to be hired and to convince companies that you're something special and, they can't find it anywhere else when you have a higher, like a post-grad degree. So that's how I ended up going for the master's and then the PhD.
Okay. And was it straight from the master's into PhD?
Yes. It was straight from undergrad to master's to PhD. And they're encouraged. Now we encourage students to just, go straight for the PhD. You can always get the master's along the way. I didn't do that because I wanted two things. One, I was scared. It was just a big commitment. And again, being up here without your family to support you, without anyone in Grenada having done things like this, I wanted to take it step by step, make sure I knew what I was getting into. But also I wanted to make sure I learned as much as possible. So when you go into grad school, you start publishing papers and doing, original research. Everything you do has to be new. It's not in a textbook somewhere. And so I wanted to ease into the writing and the research and really get my feet under me before I decided to just go straight for a PhD. So that's why I decided to do that. But students now can just go straight for the PhD. Okay. And that should be fine.
Interesting. So can you explain in the most layman of terms what your PhD was about?
Sure, I can try. And not, have us here for like a 2-hour lecture. So when you think about flow, even when you're flying, right, you encounter turbulence. And when we think about turbulence, we think about the airplane shaking, right? Turbulence is actually a fluid phenomenon. So it happens in anything that's fluid, water, air, liquid, whatever. And all it is instabilities. So think about flowing and then you start getting unstable and then things just grow and grow. Eventually you feel it on the airplane, but it goes from the micro scale. So from right now we have air in right now in the room, right? Yeah. If we turn a fan on, you can get turbulence from that. But then you could get turbulence in the atmosphere. That's what you feel as well. You can get turbulence in space, depending on the type of system that you're looking at and dealing with. So that is the phenomenon that I studied. basically the fundamentals of turbulence, how it works, because that is one of the most difficult. And I'm not I'm quoting century-old people when they say it's one of the hardest problems, and we're probably never going to figure it out.
Yeah.
So my part of it was trying to study that and figuring out for turbulence near a wall. So picture an aircraft or a spacecraft or whatever, a ship, a submarine. You have the surface and then something's flowing over it, whether it's air or water. So next to that surface, if the surface is smooth or rough, how does that change your turbulence? Because when you understand that, then you can understand how your performance changes, because what turbulence does, it affects everything. It gives you more drag, so it slows you down. It decreases your performance, so you use more fuel. And it also, if you're trying to be stealthy and quiet, it's acoustically loud, so you show up on radars a lot more. So the idea is if we can understand that and maybe put it in some engineering format, then we'd be able to reduce it or at least harness it in some way. So that was my PhD, basically. It was experimental, but also there was that theoretical side of trying to come up with those correlations and statistical analysis that could help us understand the chaos that is turbulence.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's pretty cool because you're talking about, I know, like planes and submarines or boats, but I'm hearing that this can be like directly related to people, like athletes, running,
yes,
and all of that. So
absolutely,
it's interesting when you think of engineering and mechanics, it's not limited to just, like machines.
You are so right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So you've done all this research, you've done all this studying for years and years, and then it's time to, they might say, go out into the real world. So I know, like with a PhD, generally you kind of have two options. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but you can like go into academia, which you're in now, or go into industry and like actually work in corporate, I guess. So what was your choice? And how did you choose which way you wanted to go?
So as usual, by the time I got to my PhD, I'd started, getting mentors. In undergrad and in master's and PhD, I developed some strong mentorship relationships. And so I talked to those people, half of whom were in academia and half of whom were in industry, trying to understand what was the best fit for me. Because that's the key with everything I'm saying. It's not the end all be all, and it's not this is the way it should be. I know we like absolutes, but it's what's best for you and your personality and the way that you work. Because at the end of the day, whatever you get into, you want to thrive, So that's, I talked to them and I thought the tenure process that's associated with academia was just really, it sounded really difficult and unnecessarily so. And it sounded like it was almost like having to prove yourself again to people who didn't want you. And it felt like a special club that you were trying to get into. And I just didn't like that mindset. I wanted to do cool work and not worry about, I don't know, all the proving yourself and the borderline hazing and all that. So in industry, you could definitely make more money in the short term. And you get to work on actual real problems. And that was really appealing to me. And in addition, I always thought, okay, I could always circle back to academia. If I go into industry, the other way might be a little bit harder. And so that's why I thought, okay, let's go into industry. It feels right now. It feels right for me right now. So that's why I decided to go there. But as usual, like I said before, you always diversify. You always leave a door open in case things don't work out. And so that's kind of what academia was for me. So even though I went off into industry for 6 years, during those 6 years, I was writing papers. I wrote 3 journal papers just at night, just on my own time. And that counts toward my academic publications now. Mm-hmm. So I never really closed that door completely, just in case industry didn't work out, which it did. So
yeah. Okay, I have a couple directions I want to go. I think first I'll take a step back because you talked about developing some really strong mentorship bonds while you were doing your PhD. And I know that can be like daunting for some. It's like, where do I find a mentor? Like, what do I say to them? So what was it like? Did it come naturally to you? And I guess maybe like, what are some like practical tips you might have for finding and keeping mentors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the bulk of the mentors I have, and I would say I have maybe between 3 and 5, depending. I have mentors for different things, and I actually recommend that. So I have like a mentor for like technical things, like, okay, I'm working on this problem, let's talk it through. I also have a mentor for career advice who doesn't really understand what I do day to day, but they understand, how to progress in your career. Then I have female mentors who kind of understand what it's like to be a female engineer. Then I have a mentor who's like Black and he understands what that's like and the challenges that come with that. So I definitely approached it that way because when you're a person like me, where you have such an intersectionality of underrepresented minority features, you kind of need to diversify your mentorship because no one person could really support every part of who you are. In terms of finding a mentor or mentors that fit this, it was really organic for me because I positioned myself. So here's the thing, that if I had to say one thing that lets things fall in place, even back before I got the scholarship, just always be open to things. Always, when an opportunity shows up, unless you already have enough and you're going to burn out, take the opportunity. Do the extra presentation that someone asks you to do. Do the interview that someone asks you to do. Just always put yourself out there, but with the intent not to show off, but to learn. I always put myself out there to show what I've done. But hey, what do you guys think? Was there anything I could do better? Do you guys see any opportunities for collaborating to make this better? When you approach things that way, somehow mentors just show up because they see what you're doing and they like it, or they see what you're doing and the way you presented it and the fact that you put yourself out there makes them want to invest in you. And so from the few people who might reach out to you afterwards, you see who's a personality fit, because that's important. It has to be someone you can get along with. And then for me, it was really organic. I never once said, hey, will you be my mentor? It just kind of developed into, we're talking, I email them. Here's the other thing. I think a lot of these people gave me their cards or they say reach out to me and they didn't think I would, but I did. And relationships just grow from that. Some of them, are for time and then they end as you move to different things. But I would say always put yourself out there, speak up, ask questions. And if it's not your presentation, always ask a question in someone else's presentation. And take the cards and follow up, even if it's just to say, hey, I really liked your presentation. Thanks for sharing. You don't know what could come from that. And as you talk to people, then you realize who's a good fit for you. If I had just a good rule of thumb, though, when you look around, if you want to actually be more systematic about it, like I need a mentor. How do I find a mentor?
Yeah.
Look at where you want to go. Where are you trying to get to? Find someone who's doing that and just reach out to them. People are generally more willing to help than you would think.
That is true.
Half the time you do have to be a little persistent because time is an issue for a lot of people. But if you put in the work and you don't quote unquote waste their time, but you come to them with specific questions, and people will help you.
So the other thing I wanted to ask is, what were your options? So yeah, we talked about like corporate or industry or academia, but in industry, like what are the options for someone with a degree in aerospace?
Yeah, that's a great question because there are a lot of them. I like to think of it like in 3 kind of categories. You can go into your typical corporate America, so like your big companies like your Boeing, your Pratt and Whitney, Northrop Grumman, and other big aerospace companies. or you can go into like the government. So you can work for a government lab, or you could be a civilian, like not in the Navy as an officer, but like as a civilian engineer, or any branch of the DoD. And then the third one is more like an in-between of those. So you have smaller companies, small businesses that you can join as a contractor or consultant, and you get to work on bigger problems, but a small part of it. So that's closer to research, but you still get to work on a very applied problem. So you get to work on real world problems. So I like to think of it that way. But there's also kind of a fourth avenue, which is like, don't go into aerospace at all. A lot of students right now, instead of going to work in the traditional aerospace industry, they go to work at Amazon and they make a lot of money. They go to work in Silicon Valley, and because the skills you pick up as an engineer, the coding skills, the critical thinking and problem solving, it is applicable across a wide range. I know engineers who left with like a PhD, and now they work on Wall Street developing code and algorithms for like the stock market.
Wow.
So there's this whole other avenue of, if you don't really care about the aerospace part, you can apply the knowledge and the skills that you learned in a different way.
Interesting. So which of those directions did you go in when you started?
So I went for the big companies. So I went to work at Pratt and Whitney initially, and I was designing compressors there. I had a PhD, so I was working in a very small team, and I was looking. So in a sense, it wasn't the traditional job that you go after your master's or even after undergrad. Because I had a PhD, it was more of a research role, trying to develop the next generation of engines. But yeah, I worked for like a little over 3 years there, just developing the technology for new compressors. It was a really big company. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of people working there. And it was interesting, but it didn't feel like a good fit for me. And so I ended up moving to the second option, which is like the small business type thing. And that was great for a while. It was a much better fit than the bigger company, because I was working out in a company of like 50 people versus like 30,000. So we were just a lot more agile, and we were able to be more innovative without the bureaucracy. And that, like I said, was great. I got to work with really, really smart people, both within the company and also our customers. Like I worked with a lot of people in the DoD and just other companies. I got to work for the bigger companies now, but just as a small consultant. And that was really, really fun.
Nice. And so you recently made a switch back into academia. So what was, what egged on that decision, I guess?
There were several reasons. And interestingly, it wasn't any of the reasons that I normally use to go into a job. So usually I look at, is it a good fit for me, and all these like the work that I'd be doing. But for academia, it turned out that it was equally a push as well as a pull for me to come here. In industry, everything is really subjective in terms of performance and promotions and those type of things. And I have known some really, really great people who even they fell victim to like bias of some kind. And I always felt like I was on the short end of the stick. I was always being paid less or awarded less, or just everything was just less than my colleagues, who were a lot of times not as qualified as I am. So I think after moving to 2 companies, I realized these are good people. It's just, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but that's just really hard to get away from. So that was a big push. And then also there is always going to be a ceiling to the innovation when it comes to going to industry. In academia, I could literally just come up with an idea, and if I could get funding for it, I could just go down that rabbit hole and try to figure it out. That kind of innovation, that kind of freedom to, really do authentic, new, novel research, you can't find anywhere else. And it took me going outside trying to see if it was out there to realize, no, you can only really find that in academia, because everything else has certain constraints depending on the industry that you're in. So that was definitely a pull in the academia side. There was also just personal reasons. I came from Grenada when I was 19, and I came here to Virginia Tech. And so when I think about home in the US, it's here. So it was really nice to just come back to familiar people, familiar places, and get to do cool work.
So how has it been being back?
It's been great, but it has definitely been a lot of adjustment. The job of professor is quite difficult. Not necessarily it's not harder in terms of the technical things. It's just a lot. It's like doing 5 different jobs, which I didn't fully appreciate. So you have your research, which is what I've been doing for the past 6-7 years out in industry. So I still have to do that. I still have to, find funding, write proposals, bring in money for grants, and then do the research. But now in addition to that, I have to find students and mentor students and get them through the grad program and advise them and just make sure they have everything they need to be able to do great work. I have to be publishing a lot more papers now. That's like a whole third job in itself. And then there's service, because a core part of the university, of any university, is serving the community and the world on a whole. So, keeping the university going is a whole other part of the job. So it could be a lot. And then on top of all that, I have to teach. That is literally what everyone thinks about when they think professor. But that is like
that's like the last
of what
thing.
we do. Yeah, that's almost like the easy part, because we already know the material. So you go and you teach it, you communicate it in an effective way, but there's all these other things going on in the background. So it's definitely been an adjustment time-wise, and just trying to figure out the most efficient way to do this, and how to delegate, and how to trust people to do things on your behalf.
Yeah. Wow. It almost sounds like entrepreneurship to me. Like you're kind of figuring out 10 different roles at the same time.
And you have that ownership as well, similar to, because I can take my research program in any direction I want. Granted, I had to justify it and I had to find money to fund it, but there's no one really at the top saying, okay, Liselle, you have to go design whatever that does this. There's none of that. I get to decide what that is. And it's great. It's a lot of freedom, but it's also a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And I was curious, does your research now have anything to do with your PhD research?
So it does. It does have some things to do with it. So when I went out into industry, I picked up, so my PhD was in the low speed. So I did all that turbulence work at low speed, so like your aircraft speed. Now I'm looking at hypersonic speeds, which is like the speeds that, the space shuttle re-enters the atmosphere at. We're talking several Machs. But the actual core, I'm still looking at turbulence, I'm still looking at performance and aerodynamics, but now I'm looking at it at these higher speeds. So it's tied into what I was doing before, but it's almost like an expansion of that, which is fun.
Wow. So this might be a random question, but I'm wondering, do you have anything that you might call like a favorite failure? So something that seemed like it went really wrong for you, but eventually turned out being like a blessing in disguise.
Oh, yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I think I've been really blessed in that I haven't had any like real failures. But, for perfectionists, everything. We can make things into a failure if we wanted to. But to answer your question, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is just there are some professional and even personal relationships that kind of failed, meaning they ended, or things just didn't go as well as you planned. Maybe you didn't work together for as long as you planned, or a collaboration didn't turn out. But in those instances, and I could think about like maybe 2 or 3 of them just clearly, I am very grateful, because usually when that happens, if you trust yourself and you know that you're working with integrity and you're being true to yourself and what you want to do, it always turns out that that was probably not a good collaboration or a good fit that would get you to where you want it to be. And it turns out there was always something better down the line. So I don't have any specific failures, but I would definitely say in terms of like people coming in and out of your life or your professional life, definitely those have worked out. That the people who stick around, the relationships that go the distance, whether professional or personal, they've been the ones that really fit and really help me grow and become better.
I love that. Now also, and this might be a difficult question, but I wonder if there's anything that you have changed or done differently, maybe in the past, I'll say 6 months to a year. I know you've had some big changes in that time, but anything that you've done, could be a purchase, an investment, anything that has like made a significant difference positively in your life.
I love that question. And the thing is, there's over my entire life, I'm always changing, I'm always adapting and learning new things, and what doesn't work, you get rid of it and you keep what does. So I love that question, because I think it's an important one for everyone to kind of hear, and also realize that it's okay to get rid of things or to pick up new things, no matter what your age is. So if I had to pick one for recently, I think I'm becoming a lot more aware, and I'm putting a lot more effort into self-care, which sounds like such a small thing, but I just told you I'm literally doing 5 jobs right now.
Yeah.
And I am definitely at the risk of burning out. So I've been putting a lot more time into taking care of myself. And what that looks like is some very practical things, actually. So there's certain days of the week that I just block off. My calendar is blocked, and I will not take meetings or anything like that. Those are the days when I do my research, and I go and I write and I read, and you block out the entire world. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you're always getting requests and knocks on the doors and meetings, and you don't have time to actually focus on the critical work and give yourself time to dig deep into something and really think. And that has definitely that has changed things a lot, just blocking off that time and saying that time is for me to literally just think, and block out the noise of the world. And that helps personally and professionally. So professionally, I block off at the end of the week when I'm in the office and do that. But also personally, there's at least one Saturday a month I don't do anything. So I try to do it more often than that. Like today, I didn't really work too much, but there's one Saturday a month at least that I'm just not doing anything. I'm going to go for a massage. I'm going to just, watch a movie and just do absolutely nothing. And it sounds like a small thing, but I actually plan that day, and nothing is, I'm trying really hard to never, reschedule that day.
Yeah.
Because it's important. It really is.
It really is. I love that. Like really good boundary setting
I'm learning.
Yeah, because now I'm curious, because like you do sound like, you've been a bit of a perfectionist and maybe a workaholic even.
Absolutely.
So I guess like, was there something that you've like, was there something that happened that you felt like you needed to make these big adjustments and changes to set those boundaries so that you can kind of survive it all?
Yeah. I think moving to this new job, definitely. But also, I last year lost my absolute best friend, who anyone who knows me knows who he was. He was my dog, my mini golden doodle Kai. I lost him very suddenly. And that has been a really, really tough process. And it just really showed me that I need to take better care of myself and I need to value my time. I really need to protect my time and who I give my time to, because I would give anything for just 5 more minutes with him, right? And it just really drove home how important it is to take care of yourself and value the people in your life who deserve your time, and make sure whatever you're doing, you're passionate about it. Do not waste your time. At the end of the day, money, all that stuff, at the end of the time is the one thing you can't get back. So I have just really pushed myself to the way I frame it is protect my time. That is the most valuable asset I have right now. So that's kind of both moving to this job and then losing him the way I lost him. And it's just like, I need to reevaluate.
Thank you for sharing that. And best of luck to, staying true to it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Liselle, what do you think the next 5 to 10 years might have in store for your career? I mean, it sounds like you kind of go with the flow a bit and where the opportunities take you, but is there something that you're striving for?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely just go with the flow. It's like whatever is going to make me happy, or is going to make me feel like I'm contributing and have purpose is where I tend to go. So in the next 5 to 6 years, with academia, there's the whole tenure process, and that takes about 5 to 6 years. So if I had to guess, I'd probably stick with that and get to the end of that. Hopefully I get tenured, and then, that's a whole other chapter where I can become more established and do even greater things. So that's the plan professionally. Personally, there's a lot I want to do, starting to think finally about, settling down, having a family, all those things are in the cards for sure. But yeah, professionally, I definitely think I'm going to be at Virginia Tech, or at least in academia, for at least the next 6 to 10 years. But the truth is, we'll see.
We'll see. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of advice for the younger generation, maybe. If you had to go back and visit your, let's say, 15-year-old self, and just give her a piece of advice for the future, what would that be?
Oh, wow. I mean, if it's myself, I tell her just don't doubt yourself as much. Because that really holds you back. And it may not look like it based on my history, but there's a lot of self-doubt and insecurity that I think everyone has. We just don't admit it. We keep it to ourselves, which is even more dangerous. But if I could just tell her, whatever you plan to do, if you work hard and you're already working hard, keep that going and put yourself out there and be true to yourself. It's going to work out. It may not work out the way you plan, because I could have never envisioned where I am right now, but it's exactly where I'm supposed to be. So I would just tell her, stop being so hard on yourself, because I was so hard on myself, and I think a lot of young people are. In the beginning of this interview, we were talking about them trying to do so much, and that's great and admirable, but just be kinder to yourself. It's very important. It could, in my opinion, it makes the journey a lot easier. You're probably going to end up in the same place.
Yeah. But
if you don't self-flagellate all the time and you're not beating yourself up, you get there with a lot less pain. And I learned all this through years and years of therapy, which is probably another thing I would tell her: immediately get into therapy. Don't wait until you're I think I started when I was 22.
Yeah.
Just start early, because that's really important, getting to know yourself.
Yes, and yes. I have goosebumps right now. I don't know if it's my fan or not, but that was really powerful. That was a really powerful piece of advice. I couldn't think of a better way to end. So with that, if there's anyone listening who now wants to hear more from you, although you're super busy, but who maybe doesn't want some advice or has some questions about the process, what is a good way for them to reach you?
Sure. So I'm on the Virginia Tech website. If you Google my name, you will find the website. Just reach out via email. That email's on there. It's just my first name, GT. Here's the thing. I've had a few people after every interview reach out to me, and I am more than happy to help. But again, understanding that mentors and people, you have to come with very specific things that I can help you with. So I just want to urge people, reach out to me. I want to help, but I cannot figure out who you are or where you need to be. If you give me that, then I can help you figure out how to get there. But, a lot of people have reached out and be like, oh, I want to do what you did. Or I'm thinking about aviation. It's hard for me to do anything with that without more specifics. So think about what you want to do the research, figure out where it is you want to be. Send me an email with, some options, and I'm always ready and willing to help. It's just, I also need to protect my time and figure out how best I can help you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really important, that specificity of, not just saying hey, I need help, meet you halfway, you need to do some of the work yourself and see what it is. What is it that you're actually struggling with that,
absolutely
only Liselle can help you with?
Yeah, because I'm ready to do that.
Yeah.
I just need to know the specific questions, otherwise I can't answer them.
Yeah. So I hope you guys are listening if you're looking to reach out, but thank you for that. Well, Liselle, it's been a really great interview. I feel like the time went by so quickly because I was actually enjoying everything that you were talking about. And I'm sure that the listeners also had some great takeaways. So thanks again for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you. It was a privilege to be here as always.
All right. And to the listeners, thank you for joining us on today's Pathway. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to leave a comment wherever you found us today and let us know what you think about this episode. If you liked this one, I think you might like this next one even more. Go check it out and let me know.